Do you want to meet your favorite character from a book or show? That's certainly a dream for many people, and there's tons of ways to be able to see these characters brought to life. Through live events, theme parks, and even cruise ships, they are everywhere, and it's all thanks to the brilliant minds behind them. The art of bringing characters from a cartoon or book to the real world is honestly one that needs to be studied. And these days, it's more prevalent than ever. Costumes, animatronics, and now, digital interactions. There's tons of ways to be able to meet your childhood heroes. But in my opinion, nothing compares to the vast world of Thomas the Tank Engine brought to life. From the very first Thomas all the way to now, the cheeky little blue tank engine has been produced in many shapes and sizes all around the world. So today, I'd like to take a deeper look into the many ways Thomas has been shown, not through merchandising, but through its real-world appearances, as Soda isn't real. Sorry in advance. A quick note before we start, this will only cover Thomas. As much as I'd like to cover the other characters, Thomas is the flagship engine of this brand, so his appearances are more extensive. So, let's get started. The first section covers all of the different railways that have had Thomas as a full-scale engine, which is also where Thomas got a start at jumping from book to life. In 1971, Wilbur Audrey visited the Nene Valley Railway to name a specific engine, Huswell Clark No. 1800. It was built in 1947 and spent its entire working life working for the British Sugar Corporation. After getting less work thanks to diesel engines taking over, the Peterborough Railway Society, later the Nene Valley Railway, set up a working base by the locomotive siding in 1970, where it gained the nickname Thomas for its blue livery. The next year, Audrey came to officially christen the engine as Thomas, with the locomotive becoming the very first full-scale steam engine in the world meant to imitate the titular character. After working one last harvest season, Thomas was officially bought by the MVR in 1973 for £100. It wouldn't be the last time he was in service though, as Thomas went back in 1986 to help for a day after a diesel failed. Hilarious. After the purchase, Thomas wouldn't see the light of day until 1979, due to a lack of parts to give him a proper overhaul. Since he's returned to steam though, Thomas has been an incredibly popular engine, including at Dale with Thomas events. While he doesn't attend Dale with Thomas events anymore, thanks to Hit Entertainment and an unfortunate lawsuit, you can still find him at the Nene Valley Railway, being a really useful engine in the Wallsford Yards when he's not being overhauled. Fun fact, this Thomas was in an event that inspired the Railway Series story, not the ticket. Speaking of Dale with Thomas, these events are where you can meet and ride behind the famous blue tank engine. The UK was where these were born, so they are masters at it. The standard approach for these is to take an 060 tank engine, maybe rebuild it, paint it blue, give it a sometimes creepy looking face, and boom, Thomas. The most common engines to undergo the transformation are either austerities, Wilbur's basis, Ginties, or other random industrial locos. Smaller gauge railways also hold Dale with Thomases, with even smaller Thomases. Some railways have developed a further source of income in the hiring of Thomases to railways that do not have a Thomas of their own. I believe the most famous of them all is this one, nicknamed Dave in the off-season. He was built by Hunslet as number 3871 in 1952 as an austerity for the National Coal Board, working at Maesteg Colliery. It was originally bought by the Kent and East Sussex Railway in 1977 and named Linda before being sold to the Watercress Line. It arrived on the MHR in 1994 and was signed up by the Bridalcraft Company to be rebuilt to resemble Thomas. It continues to perform this role both at the Watercress Line and on hire to other heritage railways to this day. The original face had mechanical eyes that moved about, but in 2013 all UK Thomases made the switch to CGI faces, and now it's boring with no movement. Tons of railways cashed in, and while not as many do it in the present day, there are still so many images and photos of Thomases either running a race or just idling in the station. It truly is fun to scroll through the wiki to see them all. Moving on to the United States, the very first representation of Thomas came from the National Railroad Museum in Green Bay, Wisconsin, when they painted Pullman Car and Manufacturing Company No. 29 to look like the little blue tank engine for a Dale with Thomas event in 1993. Unfortunately, this was an unlicensed event, and you can be sure it didn't end very well. With this in mind, the museum opted to get into good terms with the Bridalcraft Company and began to develop the first official Dale with Thomas event in America. However, they couldn't use this logo again. I'm betting it was because of Britt. She knew exactly what Thomas had to look like, and it wasn't that. So, how is the museum going to get Thomas for Dale with Thomas? Enter a small Plymouth shunter. Now, when you look at this, you may wonder, how the hell does this become Thomas the Tank Engine?
Well, I can answer that.
Hey, that's my line.
Not anymore. This is where I commandeer the video. I've spent 2 years researching this, and you're not gonna take this from me. I'm Ginger on Rails, or Joey, and let's get things straight. This small Plymouth switcher lived a rather uneventful life at the NRM in Green Bay. The museum asked if they could run an official Thomas event like the UK did, studying the successes abroad and growing audience in the USA. After some negotiations, Galore agreed. The NRM decided to use their forgotten Plymouth as a basis for the Little Blue engine. Wisconsin Public Services, a power company, allowed the use of their diesel shops to manufacture the Thomas body shell that went over the Plymouth body. The team at the shop inside the NRM modified the chassis with a dummy axle up front, turning this 040 into a proper 060. Galore shipped in a Thomas face from the UK, and the US's first official Thomas was assembled. From late 1995 until the end of 1999, this little shunter was trucked all around the United States and even Canada, from New York to California and frequent stops back in Wisconsin. It was even the first Thomas in Pennsylvania, besting the famous Strasburg Thomas by a good few years. However, the success was short-lived, as the little engine was not cut out for such heavy use. It quickly became routine to simply shunt it around as a dummy unit, with a proper engine on the rear end of the train. By 1999, the poor thing was worn out, hardly being able to get into gear. Strasburg and Galore had already been in good contact, with Strasburg's rebuilt dock tank now taking the limelight as America's Thomas. By 2001, the first dummy units were also rolling out, and our little diesel had been long locked up. It also had a brief stint as a Halloween attraction for a single season, hence why it was painted black. However, it now remains forgotten, and contrary to popular belief, the museum has zero plans on ever restoring it. That was a brief overview, but there's so much more I couldn't cram in today. I have a full documentary on the 70 plus years of this switcher coming out in the next few months, so keep an eye out on my channel for the full, uncovered mystery of America's first Thomas. Anyways, I've been Ginger on Rails, and this is where I take my leave. Goodbye!
Okay, back to your host with the most. Now we move to Lancaster, Pennsylvania, home of the Amish and the Strasburg Railroad. As Joey has mentioned, let's talk about probably the most famous Thomas in America, Brooklyn Eastern District Terminal number 15. This Porter locomotive, with a long working career, was bought by Strasburg as a static display. However, in 1998, Strasburg was looking for more ways to make revenue, and noting how successful the events were in Green Bay, Strasburg made an offer to the Brodolkoff Company wherein they would purchase the locomotive and turn it into Thomas. After a rebuild, including converting the loco to be a coal burner, Thomas steamed up and went to his first Day Out with Thomas event on April 29, 1999. This Thomas is still used to this day, and it also does a bit of traveling sometimes. Following the growth of Thomas in the new millennium, Strasburg built 5 dummy units that could be transported to railroads all across the United States and Canada, replacing the little Plymouth like Joey mentioned. They all were standard gauge, with one narrow gauge unit being the exception. These are stored at Strasburg when not in use. In 2014, all of the US Thomases got CGI faces, which were animatronic and would talk throughout the ride. Martin Sherman recorded voice lines, and later, Mesa Contreras, Thomas's first AEG voice actor. Starting in 2023, the Thomases began to have sticker decals placed on them to match the yearly themes of Day Out with Thomas, the latest being bunting. The UK also does this. To wrap this section off, let's go to Japan's Oigawa Railway. Here we have the JNR C11 number 227, built in 1942. It worked on 3 lines in Hokkaido before being withdrawn in 1975. It was then bought by the Oigawa to run heavy passenger services. In 2014, Sony Creative Products began to offer the Day Out with Thomas events in collaboration with the Oigawa Railway, and the locomotive they chose to represent Thomas was 227. 227 was the main engine for many years until 2021, when the locomotive was pulled from service. But now, what will represent Thomas? Enter C11 number 190, built in 1940 and allocated to Kishu Island, where it even pulled a royal train. It was due to be scrapped in 1977, but it was bought by a railway enthusiast to live on his private island. In 2001, Oigawa bought the engine, and in 2003, it was restored to steam. Starting in 2021, it has represented Thomas. The Oigawa Railway has seen great success thanks to the event, with sales numbers becoming extraordinarily good after some years of hardship. The other member of the class I want to talk about is number 64. Built in 1935, it arrived at the Kyoto Railway Museum in 1972, still operational, but it was eventually taken out of service and left in the roundhouse. However, in 2021, the locomotive was modified into Thomas for the Thomas the Tank Engine exhibition to spin out on the turntable for all to see. It stayed like this for 5 months until it was repainted back into its original J&R black livery. As of April 29, 2025, it has been turned back into Thomas for the 80th anniversary and also coincide with the History of Thomas the Tank Engine exhibition held there. It will stay like this until January 12, 2026. Quick mention about the New South Wales Rail Museum in Australia, who's begun to use the AEG faces. Ew. Also, Australia has tons of Thomases, and so does New Zealand, Italy, and Poland. As much as I'd like to go in depth of all the history of the locos used here, if I did so, this video would be extremely long. And considering how much more we have to talk about, I unfortunately won't cover them here. However, if you would like to learn more about other countries' Dale with Thomas events and the engines they use, check out the Dale with Thomas page on the Thomas Wiki. I love Thomas theme parks, so this section will be fun to cover. To begin this section, we must continue our trip down under. In 1994, a 7.25-inch gauge Thomas was created to run in emu planes through Powerline models. Through it, the creators, Roger and Beverly Jones, decided to make something out of it. In 1996, on the west outskirts of Sydney, a brand new theme park was opened called the Train Shed. The first officially licensed Thomas theme park, guests could visit and take a train ride with Thomas and his friends, whose cast grew as time went on. 2 more Thomases were built as spares and for renting out at events, such as Dale with Thomas. Unfortunately, due to construction of Badger Creek Airport, the site was shut down in 2014, with all the Thomas characters turned into generic locomotives. However, a Thomas does still exist and is present at the New South Wales Rail Museum for special events. In 2025, the model was given an AEG face. Oh, that's so wrong. Seriously, who put this here? Well, my mom walked in and saw that with the success of the Thomas brand, a Thomas-themed land at an existing theme park was bound to happen. And on July 18, 1998, Fujiku Highlands in Japan became the place where Thomas was introduced to the theme park world. Of course, one of the main attractions was riding behind Thomas. Thomas and Percy's Fun Ride featured a miniature Thomas, of course, who would take you around to multiple island locations and even see references to the show. The model was developed by AK Works, who also developed the models used on Thomas and James's Happy Train at Japan Monkey Park. The ride had guests being able to travel behind the little blue tank engine and his red comrade, hopefully looking at monkeys. This was made to go over an already existing unit, so the proportions were somewhat strange. You can't see them anymore, as in 2008, the railway was shut down. You can still find a smaller version of Thomas through a Happy Train attraction though. However, all before actual attractions, Band Presto introduced Let's Go Thomas in 1992. The ride is commonly featured at various Japanese theme parks or Thomas and Friends themed events across the country. Guests hop onto Annie and insert a coin. Once inserted, Thomas speaks and takes you around a small layout, usually decorated by cutouts and a Sir Tom Hat statue. You can still find some of these today out in the wild, including Japan Monkey Park and even an official Thomastown, Japan location. A second variation of this ride was released in 2003, which allows single riders to ride inside Thomas himself. This was aptly titled Let's Go Thomas 2. A similar model was made by Rolls Model IND Railroads for North American markets, though this one was not coin operated and was just powered by a generator, similar to the ones featured at the Train Shed. However, this one wasn't just limited to 7.25 gauge. A 7.5 gauge also existed, alongside a 10.25 gauge. These were made to order from about 2008 to 2017, and bought in packs with coaches and tracks at a hefty price tag. There goes my dreams of buying a 10.25 gauge Thomas. This one can usually be found at events and other exhibitions. I quite like this one, it feels very 2000s. Next, it's time we talk about the most famous Thomas theme park unit, this one, made by Metabolao Emmeline. This unit first made its appearance at Drusilla's Park in 2007 as an 042, and will later be featured at several Six Flags parks and Drayton Manor as an 060. Six Flags removed the Thomas license for the 2011 season, and Drusilla's Park craned Thomas out in 2017 to make him look more generic, leaving Drayton's unit the only one of these units still themed. In 2014, the Drayton Manor unit was updated with a CGI face. Finally, we talk about Thomas Land USA, which I've already made a video on. Go check it out. Ediville Family Theme Parks Thomas was a narrow gauge Dale with Thomas dummy unit, which they had held a few Dale with Thomases before. Due to a lawsuit, however, Thomas Land USA isn't open anymore, although they still hold a few Dale with Thomas events. Kenny would open their Thomastown in 2018, and with it came a brand new Thomas ride. This would go around the park's loop of track, but was prone to derailing. I say was because it did not return for the 2025 season and now looks more generic. There is another Thomas ride coming to the USA through the Thomas & Friends Adventure Train Treasure Hunt at Mattel Adventure Park in Glendale, Arizona. Try saying that 10 times fast. This one is of course based on All Engines Go and was available by Chance Rides. This will be a loop around the park and is scheduled to open later this year. Although, given how many times the project has been delayed, this could change. By the looks of it, the same ride also will appear at a new location in Bonner Springs, Kansas in 2026. Other mentions include the several types of Thomases seen throughout the history of Thomastown in Asian countries, this thing in Italy, Thomas's one-year appearance at Etherland in South Korea, this super cool Thomas Mall ride, and Go Thomas, a Japanese coin-operated ride, similar to Let's Go Thomas. This final part of the video will see all representations of Thomas through stage shows. I guess the first time Thomas went on tour was through Shining Time Station Live. In 1989, a replica of Thomas was made from a Jeep. By then, it had been in the Chicago Thanksgiving Day Parade that same year and Bill Clinton's inauguration parade. Shining Time Station Live went from 1993 to 1996 and went all around the nation. The show centered around Richard, a young boy who wants to be an engineer when he grows up. He tries to operate Thomas but does not know what all the controls are for and ends up derailing. Fortunately, the Shining Time Station crew come to the rescue and help to put Thomas back on track, with Richard learning a lesson in patience and cooperation. Thomas would also participate in quiz shows before the show, whistling at correct answers and blowing steam at incorrect answers. He was also available for photo opportunities at the end. The replica would make several more appearances before its final appearance at a Misty Island Rescue promotional event, where the replica was brought on a raft to the event. It is assumed this replica is now in storage. Unrelated to stage shows, but a similarly made model will be shown during the 2005 Santa Claus Parade in Toronto. This Thomas was only seen for that year and was spotted by Treehouse TV. Unlike the previous model, this one looks far more accurate. I think they did a spectacular job. Although Australia did transform steam engines, a car transformation was also made in 2002 for the Friends of Thomas event at the Workshops Rail Museum in Queensland. The model was used until the late 2000s, when Sir Topham Hatt was arrested for drunk driving Thomas on the street, when the railway transitioned to Dale with Thomas events and a new statue was created instead. As of 2019, the model has had its theme removed and used in steam rail events in Echuca Moama, Victoria. Back to stage shows and keeping in Australia, Thomas would be a special guest star at the 1998 ABC for Kids Christmas Spectacular. This model was huge. It may be the biggest Thomas that could fit on stage. Thomas would be there around the end of the play, just in time to sing some Christmas carols alongside the other stars of the show. The very first official Thomas live stage shows were the Big Live Tour and the All Aboard Tour. The shows began in 2002, with Thomas being manufactured by the Chris Reynolds Company. The model was essentially a large model train, and it could blink and change its facial expressions through 6 buttons inside the cab. Other switches inside the cab could control the steering of the engines, smoke volume, and eye movements. The tour went throughout the UK and Japan until 2006. Afterwards, Thomas's model was put into storage before being scrapped in 2018. A smaller model was also created for the show, however, it went unused. The next show was Thomas Saves the Day in 2007, and with it came a smaller Thomas. He was manufactured by the Rolling Stock Company, and once built, began touring throughout the United States, Canada, the UK, Australia, New Zealand, Japan, China, Taiwan, South Korea, and Singapore. The model was also used in The Circus Comes to Town, which began in 2009 and toured a lot of the same countries. However, for this show, 2 sets of models were used, the others being built by Vorman Decor. These would be used throughout the Netherlands, Poland, and the Czech Republic. Then came Thomas and the Hidden Treasure, which toured Australia, Hong Kong, the Netherlands, Dubai, and Singapore. After this show, Thomas and the other props were presumably put into storage in Singapore, as that's where the Hidden Treasure was last performed. However, the Europeans didn't stop doing shows until 2021, which is very impressive. Starting in 2014, Japan was started to produce Thomas shows. The first was the Treasure of Sodor. A model of Thomas was of course built, and would be used in the show until its last performance in 2024. The model was reused for the Merry Christmas from Sodor show, which was performed from 2017 to 2024. As All Engines Go took over the world, it also took over stage shows, with the first being the Bravest Engine on Sodor in 2022 as a Chinese exclusive show. An AEG live show in Japan also premiered this year entitled Who's Number 1 on Sodor, which began on March 8, 2025. They look to have made their own model, which looks far better than the Bravest Engine one. As Thomas was a part of the Little Big Club, he made an appearance during the Little Big Club Live. I'm not entirely sure if this model was at any other live shows or anything of the sort. This may be an exclusive one to Hong Kong. He also appeared through a small-scale model that came through a shed. More on this later. And of course, we can't forget about other tours. Thomas has had so many. The first tour was the All Aboard tour in 2001, in which Thomas appeared as a small-scale model with movable eyes. He would come out of the shed when necessary. I like this one. While it's definitely flat-looking, the moving eyes help elevate it. Fun fact, the model is now owned by fellow fan Rob, aka Wooden Rally Reviews. The next one comes from the failure known as the 60th anniversary party. Not much is known about it, but here's the only representation of Thomas. I understand why people ask for refunds. The next live show was at the Really Useful Theater in Dutch Wonderland in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, not far from Strasbourg. Another small-scale Thomas model resided here until 2011, coming out for 4 daily musical performances. Thomas would also have a model at certain Budlands locations, which is a chain of seaside resorts in the UK. He would appear in 2010, and again in 2012 for Thomas's Soto Day celebration. Thomas could also be seen at Darien Lake Theme Park in 2011 for a show called Full Steam Ahead. The model will go to several other shows, with the most recent appearance being recorded at Northlands. The most recent live show is Thomas's Race Day, which has been touring since 2019. Singapore has had countless Thomas mall performances, beginning in 2007 with the title simply being Thomas and Friends. 3 different plots would be created, all of them having their own special Thomases. Eventually, starting with the Misty Island Rescue Live musical, which sounds like pure art by the way, a Thomas was created that would be at all future shows, including the Little Big Club Live. However, in 2018, they replaced it with this thing. Why? Just why? One last thing. I just want to make a quick shout out to the Thomas bus, the most accurate looking Thomas out there. Looks just like if they rebuilt an E2. No, it looks like the most accurate replica of the prop. I should buy the Tomica model and use it as my main model in my videos. Over the years, Thomas has taken on many forms, both on screen and the real world. And as you can see, no matter what form, he is still beloved by parents, children, and fans alike. Thomas's big happy smile is enough to put a smile on your face, even if it does occasionally look completely cursed. And mind you, this isn't everything. There's tons of statues, inflatables, balloons, Lego models, it's all the same character. Seeing your childhood hero is an experience no one will forget. And you can be sure, wherever and whenever a kid sees Thomas, it'll be a moment ingrained into them for the rest of their lives. Even if this is what they saw. That's going to be all for this video. I decided to take a different approach for this one and do some things a bit differently. I hope you liked it. This video took a ton of time to research, and it was so much fun to do. Perhaps I'll do another video on James. I would love a reason to talk about the U-Class, the Z18, and the C56 that have taken on the role. I've also thought about making more theme park videos similar to the Edaville one if you're interested. Let me know if you want to see more of those. Quickly, I want to shout out Ginger on Rails for being a part of this video and helped me write the NRM Thomas section, as well as making the thumbnail. He's incredibly talented and has helped me so much with working out so many of my videos. Go check him out. I've linked his channel below. Before I sign off, I want to wish a happy 80th anniversary to Thomas and Friends. Hopefully, it'll still be around for years to come. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see y'all in the next one.